Han Baoju put his bowl back onto the table and was just about to admit defeat when Zhu Chong shot him a look and turned to Qu Chuji. Elder's inner strength is almost godlike and we can't but admire such a display. But it is still 5 against 1. It doesn't seem quite fair really. Qu Chuji was a bit surprised and asked then, what does second brother Zhu suggest we should do? Zhu Chong smiled and said, I say let the two of us battle it out to see who's best. All the spectators were rather baffled by this. Zhu Chong was the one, of the group of 5, still going up against him, who was obviously losing. Why would he go and lower his odds even more? But the other 6 freaks knew that although this brother of theirs doesn't seem to take anything seriously, he's full of ideas and tricks, and his actions were often pure genius. Figuring that he must have a plan in mind, the 6 of them didn't object. Qu Chuji let out a little laugh. The 7 freaks of the south really do want to look good no matter what. How about this? If second brother Zhu finishes the wine left in this vat with me, if neither is losing, then it'll count as a defeat for me. How about it? By now the vat was a little bit less than half full, with many bowls remaining. This would mean that only 2 drunken Buddhas with their big bellies could hold all of it. But Zhu Chong didn't seem to mind that as he smiled and said, although I am not a very big drinker, I once beat several pretty big drinkers during one of my adventures. A toast, he said, waving his fan in his right hand and his left shirt sleeve. He downed a bowl. So the 2 of them downed one bowl after another. In between drinks, Qu Chuji asked what kind of big drinkers? Zhu Chong replied, well, once I traveled to India and the king dragged out a water buffalo to challenge me in a drinking match. But in the end, neither of us won or lost. Knowing that Zhu Chong was poking fun at him, he just snorted in response and downed another bowl. However, he noticed that even though Zhu Chong was waving his hands all over the place while talking nonsense, he was still matching him bowl for a bowl. There wasn't any wine spilling out from his hands or feet, so obviously was not forcing the wine out of his body with inner strength, but there was a huge bulge in his stomach, so he figured that Zhu Chong may know how to expand and retract his stomach at will. He was feeling rather puzzled when Zhu Chong spoke up again. The year before last I went to Siam. Now thoughts even more ridiculous. This time the king of Siam got an elephant to challenge me. That huge thing drank 7 vats. How much do you think I drank? Even though Qu Chuji knew he was just making stuff up, he could not help but ask how much. Zhu Chong's face suddenly turned dead serious as he lowered his voice and said 9 vats. Suddenly he raised his voice again and shouted, drink up, drink up. So he just went on like this, sort of drunk but not really, kind of crazy but kind of not, and soon the 2 of them had finished off the entire vat. The rest of the freaks had no idea that he could hold all of that wine, and all of them were pleasantly surprised. Qu Chuji gave him thumbs up. Brother Zhu really is amazing. With a smile, Zhu Chong replied, to keep the wine out of our bodies, Reverend used inner strength, but I had to resort to merely outer techniques. Here, have a look. With a hearty laugh, he suddenly did a backflip, and when he landed there was a wooden bucket in his hand. With a slight wave of his hand, the fragrances of the wine that filled half the bucket came pouring out. All of the people present were martial arts masters and, with the exception of Kei Zhener, were sharp enough to pick up on any trickery or fake moves, yet not a single one of saw where the bucket came from. Looking down, Zhu Chong's belly had suddenly returned to its normal flat shape. Obviously, the bucket was hidden underneath his robe. The 7 freaks of the south all burst out laughing and Qu Chuji was shocked. As it turns out, Zhu Chong was best at trickery and illusions, and that was where the nickname Magical Hand Scholar came from. This little trick that he just pulled was passed down by magicians all the way to today. A magician would walk onto the stage with nothing in hand. With one backflip a goldfish bowl would be in his hand, another backflip and a bowl filled with water appeared. This would go on until there were enough bowls on stage, and suddenly there was one goldfish in each bowl. This is absolutely astounding when witnessed firsthand and has to be seen to be believed. The second time Zhu Chang fell through the hole was when he hid the large bucket underneath his robe. All the crazy talk was to distract Qiu Chuji. When a magician does his trick right, even hundreds upon hundreds of pairs of eyes could not spot how the trick was done. Qiu Chuji did not even suspect that he would be pulling this kind of trick and was not able to catch him pouring one bowl after another into the bucket underneath his robe. Qiu Chuji snorted, "Hang. You call this drinking?" Zhu Chang laughed. "And what you did was? The wine I drank is in this bucket, the wine that you drank is on the floor. Any differences there?" He paced back and forth as he talked. Suddenly he accidentally slipped on the puddle of wine by Qiu Chuji's feet and fell towards Qiu Chuji. Qiu Chuji caught him and let Zhu Chang balance himself. After pacing back and forth once more, he suddenly said in a loud voice, "Wonderful poem. Such wonderful poetry. Mid-autumn have always moon most bright, cool winds lead the way for a refreshing night. A day's fortune sinks man and silver, the dragons in four seas leap out water." His voice was slowly dragging out as he began to sing the lines. Shocked, Qiu Chuji thought to himself. "That's the poem that I started but didn't finish last mid-autumn. I always have it by my side in case I ever think of the next four lines. Nobody else has seen it, how does he know it?" Reaching into his shirt, he found that the scroll that contained the poem was missing. With a smile, Zhu Chang unrolled the scroll and laid it out on the table. Not only are Elderkiss martial arts among the best in the world, his poetry and style are as well. Amazing, truly amazing. He had slipped and fallen on purpose, enabling him to use those magical pickpocket skills of his to steal this scroll from Qiu Chuji. Qiu Chuji thought to himself. I didn't notice it at all when he reached into my shirt and took the scroll out. If he didn't intend to take my poem but was instead trying to stab me, would I still be alive now? Obviously, he had my life in his hands and let me live. Now that he thought about that, the anger in him subsided and he said, "Since Hero Zhu has finished this entire vat of wine with me, I will do as I promised and admit defeat. In this little match today in the Pavilion of the Drunken Immortal, Qiu Chuji lost to the 7 heroes of the South." Amid smiles, the 7 freaks of the South replied, "No, no, that's okay, this kind of game can't be taken seriously." Zhu Chang added. "Besides, Reverend Zhi's inner strength is miles above all of us." Qiu Chuji continued. "Although I have admitted defeat, those 2 widows have to be rescued." He saluted with his hands and lifted up the vatim, heading off to the Fawa monastery to get them. An angry Kei Zhen'er demanded. "You have admitted defeat, why are you still troubling Meng Jiaomu?" Qiu Chuji replied, "Lives are at stake, it has nothing to do with winning or losing. Honored Hero K, if your friend met an unfortunate end and his widow was suffering at the hands of others, would you do all you could to save them?" Suddenly his expression changed and he shouted, "Oh, I see how it is, you had more people coming. Even if you get the entire Jin army here, I'm still going to see this to the very end, even if it means giving up my life." Zhang Asheng replied. "There's just the 7 of us, no need for more people." But Kei Zhen'er had heard several dozen men running in this direction as well as the clanking of their weapons, so he immediately stood up and commanded, "Everyone back off." Zhang Asheng and all the others hid their weapons since all of them had heard the footsteps by now. Before long, several dozen men came running up the stairs. These men were Jin soldiers. Qiu Chuji respected the 7 freaks of the South and figured that they were being kept in the dark by the lies of the Meng Jiaomu. He was careful of what he said so as not to offend them too much. But suddenly, seeing dozens of Jin soldiers showing up, he could not control his anger any longer and he shouted, "Meng Jiaomu, 7 freaks, how dare you people actually befriend someone, then ask Jin for help against them? How can you still call yourself righteous men of the martial world?" Han Baoju shouted back, "Who's asking Jin for help?" These soldiers were actually the personal guards of Wang and Honglu. They followed him into town and became unsettled because Wan Yan Hongluo had been out of sight a long time. Upon hearing that there was fighting in the pavilion of the drunken immortal and fearing the worst, they came running. Qiu Chuji snorted, "Hang. All right, all right. Please forgive me for not staying any longer. This matter between us is not over yet." He picked up his vat and started to walk toward the stairs. Kei Zhener stood back up. "Reverend Q, there's some misunderstanding here." Still walking, Qiu Chuji replied, "Misunderstanding? You people are supposedly righteous heroes? Why ask Jin soldiers to help you in a fight?" Kei Zhener replied, "But we didn't." Qiu Chuji rebuked, "I can see what's going on in front of me, I'm not blind." What Kei Zhener hated the most was the fact that he was blind and anything that reminded him of it. He slammed his iron staff onto the floor and demanded, "And what if I am blind?" Qiu Chuji didn't answer as he lifted up his left hand and struck a Jin soldier on his forehead with his palm. The soldier did not even have a chance to mutter a sound before his head split open. Qiu Chuji shouted back, "He is a good example." Flipping his sleeves in the Seven Freaks' general direction, he walked down the stairs. Seeing one of their own dies, the Jin soldiers' actions immediately became chaotic as several of them charged at Qiu Chuji with lances pointed at his back. He did not even turn around and, as if there were eyes on the back of his head, he knocked each of the lances down one by one. The rest of the soldiers were just about to charge up from below as well when Wan Yan Hongluo ordered them to stop. Turning to Kei Zhener, he said, "This Taoist bastard is intolerable. Why don't all of us sit down and have a nice drink while we discuss how to take care of him?" When he ordered the Jin soldiers to stop, Kei Zhener had figured out that he was the leader of the soldiers, so he shouted back, "Damn it! Get out of my face!" Wan Yan Hongluo hadn't even recovered from this shock when Hong Baoju added, "My big brother told you to get out of his face." He bumped Wan Yan Hongluo on his waist with his right shoulder. Wan Yan Hongluo stumbled back several steps as the Seven Freaks and the monk Jiang Yu quickly filed out. Zhu Chong was trailing behind them. As he walked by Wan Yan Hongluo, he gently tapped him on the shoulder with his fan and asked with a smile, "Have you sold off that girl? How about selling her to me?" Ha ha. As he hurried down the steps he was still laughing. Although Zhu Chong did not know anything about Wan Yan Hongluo, he could tell from the way that he was treating Bao Ziruo that they were not a couple. Then he overheard him bragging about his wealth, so he had to take a bit of his money, just to cause a little trouble. But now that he found out that Ha is the leader of Jin soldiers, how could he not take more of his money? Wan Yan Hongluo reached into his shirt and, as expected, all the money that was in his shirt had, inexplicably, disappeared. Not only was he worried about the fact that all these men were such great martial arts masters, but if they somehow found out that he had Madame Bao with him, what a disaster that would be. Luckily, since Qiu Chuji and the Seven Freaks still haven't worked out their misunderstanding, this was the perfect time for him to get out of town. He immediately went back to the inn and headed north with Bao Ziruo that very night. They traveled until they arrived back at the capital of the Jin Empire, Yanjing, modern-day Beijing. As it turned out, after that night in which Qiu Chuji killed Wang Daoqian and met the two men, then killed another group of Jin soldiers, he arrived in Hangzhou in great spirits. He spent several days in a row by the lake. The Ji Peak at the north end of the West Lake, besides being a famous Taoist retreat, it was the place where Ji Hong concocted his medical pills at that time. Qiu Chuji spent his mornings enjoying the land and the people and his afternoons inside the Taoist temple on top of Ji Peak, making medicine and practicing martial arts. One day, he was walking on a pier on the shore of Qing River when he suddenly saw a group of 10 or so government soldiers walking by. In a very sorry state with their armor falling apart and their weapons broken. Obviously, they had just lost a battle. He was rather puzzled. We aren't at war with Jin nowadays, and I haven't heard anything about any ruffians or uprisings around here. Where in the world did they lose this battle? He asked around but nobody knew about it either. His curiosity piqued, he followed the soldiers back to their camp, at Command Post 6. He waited until after midnight before he snuck into the camp and dragged a soldier out into a small alley to interrogate him. That soldier was in the middle of a dream when suddenly, out of nowhere, a sharp blade was put up against his throat. In shock and fear, he did not hide a thing, and he spilled all the secrets about going into Ox Village to capture 2 men and everything else that happened that night. Qiuchuji could not believe it when that soldier told him that Guo Zhaotian had died that night, and Yang Taizhen, gravely wounded, was missing and most likely dead as well. The soldier kept on saying that the 2 widows had been captured, but on their way back, out of nowhere, they had run into another group of soldiers and, for some weird and stupid reason, they fought and lost. Qiuchuji was about to lose his temper when he realized that this man was merely a soldier who was following orders and not truly responsible for what happened. So he demanded, "Who's your superior?" The soldier answered, "The commander's surname is Duan, given name is Jiangdi." Qiuchuji let him go and snuck back trying to find Duan Jiangdi, but to no avail. The next morning, a pole was erected in front of the commander's house. A head was dangling off of the top of it, as a warning to other criminals. Qiuchuji only took one look and recognized that it belonged to Guo Zhaotian. In sadness and anger, he thought, Qiuchuji, this man is a descendant of a patriot. Out of kindness, he asked you to have a drink with him, yet you brought upon him such calamities. If you do not find justice for him, how can you go on pretending to be a man?" After forcing himself to wait until nightfall, he climbed up the pole and took down Guo Zhaotian's head. He dug a hole on the shore of the West Lake and buried the head there. After several kowtows, he wiped the tears away from his face as he silently swore, "I promised to teach the 2 heroes' children martial arts. I've kept every promise I have ever made, and if I cannot turn your children into heroes among men, then let me never see my brothers in the afterlife. I will no longer deserve such an honor." He calculated that the first thing he needed to do was find the Duan Jiangdi and get revenge for his 2 dead sworn brothers. After that, he would rescue the 2 widows and take them to someplace safe, so that the 2 kids could be born and leave a legacy for those 2 heroes. For 2 straight nights, he searched through Command Post 6 but was not able to find Duan Jiangdi at all. He became worried that this man, because of greed and corruption, did not follow military regulations and might not spend time with the soldiers under him at all. On the 3rd night, he stepped out in front of the command post and shouted, "Duan Jiangdi, come out here this instant." Because of the fact that Guo Zhaotian's head had been taken, Duan Jiangdi was inside interrogating Li Ping about any other criminal masterminds that her husband might know when, suddenly, there was chaos outside. He stuck his head out of a window and saw a big, tall Taoist, with incredible ferocity and style, grabbing a soldier with each hand and tossing them out of the way as he made his way through the crowd of soldiers. One of the commanders repeatedly shouted, "Let loose the arrows! Let loose!" In the chaos, some of the soldiers grabbed a bow but couldn't find any arrows, while other soldiers gathered some arrows but did not grab a bow. Furious, Duan Jiangdi pulled out his saber and charged forward, screaming, "Want to rebel?" He swung at Qiuchuji's waist. Seeing that he was an officer, Qiuchuji did not budge at all. Instead, he tossed aside the soldier that was in his hands and, with one simple motion of his left hand, grabbed Duan Jiangdi's wrist and demanded, "Where's that bastard Duan Jiangdi?" Writhing in pain, Duan Jiangdi immediately replied, "Is the Reverend looking for Mr. Duan? He is drinking by the West Lake. Don't know if he's going to make it back today." Believing him, Qiuchuji let him go. Duan Jiangdi turned to 2 soldiers by his side and ordered, "Take the Reverend to the lake shore so that he can find the commander." The 2 soldiers didn't catch on, so he shouted, "What are you standing there for? Hurry! The Reverend will get mad." The 2 men finally caught on and began walking. Qu Chuji followed them off. Not daring to stay a moment longer, Duan Tiandi took several guards and Li Ping'an headed straight towards the 8th command post. The commander was his drinking pal and, upon hearing what had happened, immediately offered to dispatch some help for him to catch this Taoist bastard. He was just about to dispatch his troops when his camp suddenly broke out in chaos as one of the soldiers ran in and reported that a Taoist had come charging into camp. Turned out the soldiers that were with him couldn't take the pressure and told him about the places that Duan Tiandi frequently went to. Being the alert man he was, Duan Tiandi did not hesitate and he grabbed Li Ping and ran. He ran to the 2nd command post outside of the city, figuring that he could lose Qu Chuji because of its remote location. After he settled down, the images of that Taoist rampaging through the army haunted him. By this time his wrist began to hurt and swell again. He went to an army doctor in the camp and it turned out that 2 bones in his wrist had actually snapped. Too frightened to go home, he decided to stay in the 2nd command post for the night. He slept till midnight when a disturbance outside woke him up. Apparently one of the soldiers standing guard had disappeared. Duan Tiandi jumped out of his bed, somehow knowing that the guard must have been kidnapped by that Taoist. Deciding that no matter where he hides in the army camps, the Taoist would eventually find him, he had to find something else to do. This Taoist had already met him and was only coming for him and him alone. Even though there were lots of soldiers in the army, he was probably not going to come out unscratched. He was about to break down in a panic when he suddenly remembered that his uncle, whose martial arts were quite good, had retreated to the Yunlu Temple Cloudy Pavilion Temple to become a monk. Why not hide there? Figuring that this Taoist's attacks probably had something to do with Guo Zhaotian, he ordered Li Ping be changed into a soldier's uniform and then dragged her to the Yunlu Temple with him in the middle of the night. He thought that if he really got into trouble he could use her as leverage against the monk. His uncle, given the Buddhist name of Kumu Withered Wood, became a monk a long time ago and had become the abbot of the Yunlu Temple. Before that he had been an army officer and his martial arts training came as a disciple of Xianxi, a sect that was prevalent in the provinces of Zhejiang and Jiangsu and could be considered a branch of Shaolin martial arts. He had never approved of Duan Tiandi's character and kept a distance between them. Seeing him stumbling into the monastery in such a sorry state in the middle of the night, he was quite annoyed and asked coldly, "What are you doing here?" Knowing that his uncle hated Jin to the bone, Duan Tiandi knew that if he told the truth his uncle might kill him on the spot himself, so on the way here he had already thought of a lie. Seeing his uncle's cold stare at this moment, he immediately knelt down and kowtowed. "Someone is troubling me, please help me, uncle." Buddhist monk Kumu replied, "You are an army officer. It's a miracle if you don't go troubling others. Who would dare to trouble you?" With an innocent look on his face, Duan Tiandi replied, "I'm no good, but I'm hiding here and there from this Taoist bastard. I hope that uncle will, for the sake of late father, save me." Out of pity, the monk Kumu asked him, "Why is the Taoist chasing you?" Duan Tiandi knew that the more repentant he sounded the better off he was, so he said, "It's all my fault, my fault. 2 days ago I went to the Wazi on the west side of Clear Coolness Bridge." The abbot Kumu snorted and his face dropped. Washi, or Wazi, was the slang word for brothels back at that time. From that came the saying "Was gather when the time comes, was scatters when time goes," which is used to describe something that comes easily and goes just as fast. Duan Tiandi continued, "There was someone there that I had met on many occasions, and she was in the middle of a song when a Taoist suddenly burst in and said that she had to entertain him because her song was so good." Abbot Kumu abruptly cut in. "Bull. What is a priest doing in a place like that?" Duan Tiandi replied, "That's what I said and then I told him to leave. But it turned out that Taoist was a lowlife and cursed me for enjoying myself in spite of the fact that I would lose my head in the next couple of days." Abbot Kumu asked, "What is he talking about?" Duan Tiandi replied. He said that the Jin army was going to cross the river and invade South soon and was going to kill every single one of us Song soldiers. Furious, Buddhist Abbot Kumu demanded. Did he really say that? Duan Tiandi nodded. Yes. I guess my temper was not really good either, and I got into an argument with him, saying that if Jin really did invade, we would at least all die to fight and wouldn't necessarily lose. This really rubbed the Abbot Kumu the right way, so much so that he could not help but nod in approval, as he thought this was the best thing that this nephew of his ever said. Seeing him nod, Duan Tiandi hope lit up and he continued. We just kept on arguing until we began to fight, but I wasn't a match for the Taoist. He came chasing after me. I had nowhere else to go, so that's why I came here. Uncle, please help me. The monk Kumu replied. I am a monk, am not getting involved in this kind of name-seeking matters that you men get yourself into. Duan Tiandi begged just this one time, Uncle, I will never do anything like this again. Remembering his brother of yesteryear and quite angry at the Taoist for saying what he said, the venerable Kumu finally relented. All right, you can hide here for a couple of days. I don't want any kind of trouble from you. Duan Tiandi agreed to everything and anything he demanded. Abbot Kumu sighed. An honorable army officer, but utterly useless. If the Jin army really does invade, then what will we do? Back then, I frightened by threats from Duan Tiandi, Li Ping just stood there by his side through all his lies, not daring to say a single word. The next afternoon, the guest attending monk Jiangnan ran in and reported to monk Kumu there's a Taoist priest out front, shouting all kinds of stuff and creating havoc, saying something about making Duan. Commander Duan, come outside. Abbot Kumu went and got Duan Tiandi and told him. In a panic, Duan Tiandi said. It's him, it's him. Abbot Kumu asked. Which sect does this vicious Taoist belong to? Duan Tiandi replied, I don't know which hole that barbarian crawled out of, but his martial arts don't seem that great, it's just that his arm strength is enormous. The only reason I lost is that I didn't know any martial arts at all. Abbot Kumu replied, all right, I'm going to go meet him in person. Walking out to the main hall, he ran right into Kyuchuji, who was trying to break into the temple. The guard monks were trying their best to slow him down, but they were failing. The Abbot Kumu walked up to him and gently pushed Kyuchuji's shoulder, using a bit of inner strength. He figured he would just push Kyuchuji out of the main hall. But, to his surprise, it felt as if he was pushing down on a pile of cotton. There was nothing there that he could actually push against. Knowing he was in trouble, he immediately tried to pull back. But it was too late as he stumbled back out of control and backed into the offerings table. Crack. Boom. Half of the offerings table collapsed and all the offerings on it were scattered and fell onto the floor. Shocked, a thought ran through his mind. This Taoist's martial arts are truly amazing, much more than just enormous arm strength, undoubtedly. He immediately held his palm up and saluted. May I ask why the Reverend has come to visit our humble monastery? Kyuchuji replied. In looking for an evil criminal was the surname of Duan. Knowing that he himself was no match for Kyuchuji, Kumu replied, we men of religion should always be merciful and forgiving. Why is the priest stooping to the same level as laymen? Ignoring him, Kyuchuji walked into the inner hall. By now Duan Tiandi had already hidden himself and Li Ping. Yunlu Temple's incense was very popular and it was the spring pilgrimage season, so the hall was filled with believers of both genders. Realizing that it was impossible to search thoroughly, Kyuchuji snorted and walked out. When Duan Tiandi came out from his hiding place, Monk Kumu demanded angrily. Barbarian? If he wasn't holding back, I would be dead by now. Duan Tiandi replied. That barbaric Taoist is a spy for Jin. Why else would he make a point of specifically troubling us officers of the Great Song? The Jiangnan came back in and reported that the Taoist had left. Monk Kumu asked. Did he say anything as he left? The Xiaxing replied he said that he would never give up until we turn over that officer named Duan. The Kuma shot an angry look at Duan Tianbi and said, "Judging from what you said, I can't figure out why you are hiding. This Taoist martial arts are really too strong. You probably won't come out alive if you fall into his hands." After quietly thinking for a while, he continued, "You can't stay here any longer. My younger martial brother Monk Jiangman's martial arts are better than mine. He's the only one who has a chance of stopping that Taoist. Why don't you go and hide with him for a while?" Duan Tiandi didn't even dare to utter a single word, fearing that he might anger his uncle. Later his uncle handed him a letter to give to the monk Jiamu explaining the situation. He immediately rented a boat and headed for Jiaxing in the middle of the night.